Everyone knows her face. She stands in textbooks, on postcards, in movies, in dreams. A woman of copper and flame holding a torch toward the sky. They tell us she represents freedom, hope, a new beginning. But what if that's only half the story? What if the Statue of Liberty was never meant to be just a statue? What if she was a message, a warning, a political statement, a symbol born from conflict, not celebration? Because here's the truth most people never hear. When the Statue of Liberty arrived in America, many Americans didn't want her. They called her ugly, too expensive, useless. Newspapers mocked her. Politicians argued over her cost. Some even suggested she be placed somewhere else, far from New York. So how did a rejected monument become the most powerful symbol of freedom on earth? To understand that, we need to go back. Not to New York, but to France. The Statue of Liberty was not born American. She was imagined by Europeans, designed as a political weapon, a gift, yes, but also a message. In the 19th century, France was torn by revolution, monarchy, and fear. Freedom was fragile, democracy uncertain, and across the ocean, America represented something dangerous, an idea that people could rule themselves, that kings were not eternal, that power could be questioned. The Statue of Liberty was meant to celebrate that idea, but ideas have consequences. Every detail of the statue was carefully chosen. Nothing was accidental. The torch, the broken chains at her feet, the date carved into her tablet, even her face. Some historians believe she was inspired by ancient goddesses. Others say she hides references to slavery, revolution, and rebellion. And then there is the part no one likes to talk about, the darkness. Because while the statue promised freedom, America was still struggling with racism, inequality, and exclusion. Millions of immigrants saw her as hope, but for many, that hope ended at Ellis Island. She welcomed them, and then watched as they were rejected. Families separated, dreams crushed, lives turned back. So we must ask an uncomfortable question. Was the Statue of Liberty a promise or a contradiction? Was she built to inspire the people or to impress the world? And why was she originally almost placed in Egypt, not America? Why was her torch once closed to the public after an explosion? Why do most people never notice the broken chains beneath her feet? History tells us what to admire, but it rarely tells us what to question. This video is not about destroying a symbol. It's about understanding it. Because when you understand how symbols are created, you understand how power works. And by the end of this video, you may never look at the Statue of Liberty the same way again. So stay with me. Because this is not the story you were taught in school. This is the story hidden beneath the copper. To understand why France built the Statue of Liberty, we must stop thinking of it as a gift and start seeing it as an idea made of copper. Because nations do not spend years, fortunes, and political capital to create a monument simply out of friendship. In the mid-19th century, France was a country struggling with itself, caught between revolutions and restorations, between monarchy and republic, between fear of chaos and desire for freedom. Democracy was not secure, liberty was not guaranteed, and the memory of revolution was still dangerous. Across the Atlantic, however, another experiment was unfolding. The United States, born from rebellion against a king, had survived its early years and was slowly becoming proof that a republic could endure. To many French intellectuals, America represented not just a nation, but a possibility, a future France could not yet claim. It was in this tense political climate that the idea of the Statue of Liberty was born. The project was championed by Édouard René de La Boulaye, a French political thinker, historian, and passionate supporter of democracy, who believed that celebrating American independence was also a way to promote Republican values within France itself. Publicly, the statue would honor the friendship between nations. Quietly, it would criticize tyranny. Liberty, in this context, was not neutral. She was political. Every element of the statue was designed to speak a language that both nations would understand. The broken chains at her feet symbolized the end of oppression, a subtle reference to the abolition of slavery in America, but also a warning to any system built on domination. The tablet bearing the date July 4, 1776, was not simply historical decoration, but a reminder that freedom begins with a declaration, with words that challenge power. And the torch. The torch was not just light, it was enlightenment, the belief that ideas, once ignited, cannot be extinguished by force. France did not build the statue because it was strong. France built it because it was uncertain, because symbols can say what politics cannot, because celebrating freedom abroad is sometimes safer than demanding it at home. There is an uncomfortable truth hidden here. The Statue of Liberty was as much for France as it was for America. By honoring American democracy, France was holding up a mirror to itself, asking a silent question: why not us? And yet, even as the statue was being planned, both nations were filled with contradiction. America, the land of liberty, was still healing from civil war, still struggling with racial injustice, still deciding who freedom truly applied to. France, the land of revolution, was still haunted by instability, still afraid of its own people. The statue existed in this space of tension, a promise not yet fulfilled, an ideal not yet complete. It is also important to understand that the statue was never meant to be small. Scale mattered. A massive figure towering over a harbor is not just art, it is a statement. France wanted the world to see liberty not as an abstract philosophy, but as a physical presence, immovable, visible, impossible to ignore. This is why the project required engineers like Gustave Eiffel, because liberty in the modern world needed structure. It needed strength beneath beauty. The statue's internal framework was revolutionary, designed to allow movement, flexibility, and survival, a metaphor in itself. Liberty must bend, or it breaks. France also made a crucial decision. America would build the pedestal, France would build the statue. This division was symbolic. Liberty could be gifted, but it had to be supported. Freedom, after all, cannot stand alone. And perhaps this is the most revealing truth of all. The Statue of Liberty was not created to celebrate a perfect nation, but to challenge imperfect ones. It was a reminder that liberty is not a finished achievement, but an ongoing responsibility. France built the Statue of Liberty not because freedom was secure, but because it was fragile. Not because democracy had won, but because it could still be lost. And in that sense, the statue was never meant to belong to one country. It was meant to belong to an idea, one that must be defended, questioned, and renewed by every generation that looks up at her torch. The Statue of Liberty is often described as simple: a woman, a torch, a tablet. But that simplicity is an illusion, because this monument was not designed to be admired. It was designed to be read. Every detail is a sentence. Every symbol is an argument. And together, they form a message far more complex than freedom. Let's begin with the most overlooked truth. Nothing on this statue is decorative. Not the crown, not the torch, not even the way she stands. Take the crown. Most people are told the 7 rays represent the 7 seas or 7 continents. And while that explanation is comforting, it is incomplete. The 7 rays also echo ancient imagery from Roman and Greek representations of liberty and enlightenment, where light symbolized knowledge spreading outward, not domination, but awareness. This is not a crown of power, it is a crown of responsibility. Liberty is not ruling the world. Liberty is illuminating it. And then there is the face. Her expression is calm, controlled, almost distant. This was intentional. The sculptor, Bartholdi, did not want a triumphant goddess. He wanted restraint, because liberty, when emotional, becomes chaos. And chaos was what both France and America feared most. She does not smile, she does not shout, she observes. Now look at what she holds, the tablet. Most visitors notice the date, July 4th, 1776, but they miss what the tablet represents. Law. Liberty is not freedom without structure, it is freedom protected by rules. This was a radical idea. Both France and America had seen what happens when freedom exists without law. Revolution turns to terror. Power replaces justice. The tablet reminds us that liberty survives only when it is written down, defended, and remembered. Now let's move to the detail almost no one sees. The broken chains. They are not in her hands. They are not raised in victory. They are beneath her feet. This is crucial. The chains are not what defines her. They are what she has moved beyond. But here lies the deepest contradiction. When the statue was unveiled, America had technically abolished slavery, but equality was far from reality. The chains were broken in metal, but not in society. This makes the statue uncomfortable, because it symbolizes an ideal that was not yet fulfilled, and perhaps still isn't. Now consider the torch. People say it represents hope, but historically the torch represents something sharper, enlightenment. The torch does not comfort, it reveals, and revelation is dangerous. Light exposes injustice. It makes lies visible. This is why the torch was raised high, not to warm the people below, but to shine outward toward the world. The message was clear. Liberty is not passive. It challenges. Even the way she stands matters. She is stepping forward, not standing still, not seated, moving. Liberty is not static. It demands progress. And finally, there is her clothing. The robe is Roman, not American, not French, Roman. This was deliberate. Rome represented law, republic, and citizenship, not empire, but civic duty. Bartholdi wanted liberty to feel ancient, timeless, older than nations, because if liberty belongs to one country, it can be taken away. But if it belongs to history itself, it becomes harder to kill. And here is the final hidden meaning. The Statue of Liberty does not celebrate freedom achieved. She represents freedom in progress, unfinished, challenged, contradictory. She is not a victory statue. She is a question. Are you living up to this? And that is why she still matters, because symbols that only praise the past eventually fade. But symbols that question the present never stop being relevant. The Statue of Liberty is usually shown in sunlight, bright, pure, untouchable. But history is rarely that clean, because while the statue promised freedom, the reality surrounding it was far more complicated and often uncomfortable. Let's start with something most people never hear. When the Statue of Liberty arrived in America, many Americans did not want it. The project was expensive. The country was recovering from war. Money was scarce. Newspapers mocked the statue as a waste of resources. Politicians argued that America had no need for a foreign monument, preaching values the nation itself struggled to uphold. Some critics asked a brutal question. How can a country still divided by race and inequality celebrate a statue of freedom? And that question cut deep. Because in the late 19th century, freedom in America was selective. Slavery had ended, but segregation had begun. For many Black Americans, the statue was not a symbol of liberation, but a reminder of promises broken. While liberty stood in the harbor, laws were being written that excluded millions from the freedoms she represented. And then there were the immigrants. For those arriving by ship, the Statue of Liberty was the first thing they saw. Hope. A silent promise that suffering was over. But just beyond her gaze stood Ellis Island. There, dreams were measured, judged, and often rejected. Families were separated. The sick were sent back. The poor were denied entry. Liberty welcomed them with one hand and turned them away with the other. This contradiction was never accidental. The statue symbolized an ideal, not a guarantee. Another dark chapter followed years later. In 1916, during World War I, a massive explosion shook Black Tom Island near New York Harbor. The blast damaged the Statue of Liberty. Shrapnel tore through the torch. From that moment on, the torch was closed to the public, and it has never reopened. A symbol meant to be touched by the people was suddenly out of reach. Some saw this as a safety measure. Others saw it as something more symbolic. Liberty, once accessible, became distant. And finally, there is the silence. For decades, the statue's original message about ending oppression and slavery was rarely mentioned. Instead, she was repackaged. A tourist attraction, a postcard image, a simplified symbol. The uncomfortable parts were erased, because symbols are easier to celebrate when their contradictions are forgotten. But the dark side of the Statue of Liberty does not weaken her meaning, it sharpens it. Because true freedom is not proven by monuments, it is proven by action. And the statue still asks the same question she asked when she was raised. Are you living up to what I represent? The Statue of Liberty still stands. She has survived wars, storms, explosions, political shifts. She has watched generations arrive, and generations fail to live up to her promise. And that may be the most important thing to understand about her. She was never meant to celebrate victory. She was meant to demand responsibility. Liberty does not congratulate nations. She questions them. When the statue was raised, freedom was unfinished. It still is. That is why she does not move. She does not smile. She does not cheer. She waits, waiting for societies to grow into the ideals they claim to represent. For immigrants who saw her from the decks of ships, she was hope. For those turned away, she was silence. For the oppressed, she was a promise not yet kept. And for those in power, she was a reminder that freedom is fragile. The greatest misunderstanding about the Statue of Liberty is that people think she represents what America is. She represents what America and every society is trying to become. That distinction matters, because symbols lose their power when they are treated as decoration. Liberty was never decoration. She was a warning that freedom can be claimed, but not owned, that it must be renewed, defended, and questioned again and again. Every generation looks at her torch and sees something different: hope, hypocrisy, possibility, failure. And that is exactly how she was designed. The statue does not give answers. She asks a question. What are you doing with the freedom you inherited? History shows us that liberty can be spoken of easily, but lived with difficulty. It can be carved in stone, cast in copper, and lifted into the sky. But it can also be ignored. The Statue of Liberty is not powerful because she is tall. She is powerful because she refuses to let us forget what we promised. So the next time you see her image, on a screen, in a book, or rising from the harbor, don't just see a statue, see a challenge. Because liberty is not something we look at. It is something we are measured against. And the question she asks today is the same one she asked over a century ago. Are you living up to this? If this story made you see a familiar symbol differently, and if you want more hidden meanings, forgotten truths, and the history behind the symbols we take for granted, subscribe to the channel, because history becomes powerful only when we learn to question it. And this was only the beginning.